Nashville, Tennessee, September 19th, 1963. Johnny Cash is on the telephone in a recording studio. The woman on the other end is June Carter's sister, Anita, and she's asking him to do something that shouldn't be complicated. Just tell the truth, on the record, about where he was last Tuesday night. Because June Carter's ex-husband, a man named Carl Smith who still has powerful friends in the Nashville music establishment, has been spreading a story, a specific story, about June and Johnny. A story that could destroy June's custody arrangement with her daughters. Anita needs Johnny to make one phone call to one reporter to confirm he was somewhere else with someone else, that the story isn't true. It would take 5 minutes, maybe less. Johnny Cash doesn't answer immediately. And in that silence, everything changes. If stories about the moments when saying nothing cost more than speaking up matter to you, consider subscribing. This is the kind of history we examine here.
By September 1963, Johnny Cash and June Carter had been working together for nearly 2 years. They toured together, performed together. June had become essential to his show. Her humor, her energy, her ability to ground him when the pills made him erratic. But they were not together, not publicly, not officially. June was separated from her second husband, a stock car racer named Edwin "Rip" Nix. The separation was bitter, contested, and involved their 2 young daughters. The custody arrangement was fragile. June had the girls most of the time, but the court had been clear. Any evidence of moral impropriety, any suggestion that she was unfit or involved in an extramarital relationship, and that arrangement could be revisited. June's first husband had been Carl Smith, a country music star in his own right, wealthy, connected, and still bitter about the divorce years earlier. Smith had maintained friendships with radio station managers, label executives, and journalists throughout Nashville. He had influence. And according to multiple sources from that time, he'd been looking for an opening, a way to damage June's reputation, a way to make things difficult. He found it in a rumor. The rumor went like this. On a Tuesday night in early September, Johnny Cash and June Carter had been seen together at a motel outside Memphis. Not on tour, not traveling for work, just the 2 of them. A manager at the motel had supposedly confirmed it to a local columnist. It wasn't true. Johnny Cash had been in Arkansas that night, visiting family. June had been in Nashville with her daughters. The columnist who'd published the rumor hadn't verified anything, just printed what Carl Smith's people had fed him. But the damage was immediate. June's ex-husband, Rip Nix, filed an emergency motion to modify custody, cited moral unfitness, named Johnny Cash specifically, said June was exposing their daughters to an unstable, drug-addicted performer with a criminal record. The court scheduled a hearing. June's lawyer said they needed witnesses, needed proof, needed someone to publicly confirm that Johnny Cash was nowhere near Memphis that night. Anita Carter made the call.
Think about what that phone call meant. June Carter had stood by Johnny Cash through arrests, canceled shows, erratic behavior, all the chaos that came with his addiction. She'd protected him, covered for him, kept him functional when most people would have walked away. Now her custody of her children was at risk, and all he had to do was tell the truth. What would you have done? Leave a comment. Anita Carter wasn't asking Johnny to lie. She was asking him to confirm something that was absolutely, verifiably true. He'd been in Arkansas. His mother could confirm it. Friends could confirm it. There were receipts, witnesses, a paper trail. All Johnny had to do was call one reporter, a journalist named Ed Wilson who covered Nashville music for a regional newspaper, and state the facts. He'd been in Arkansas. The rumor was false. June Carter had not been with him. Simple, clean, true. Anita explained the situation carefully, told him about the custody hearing, about what Rip's lawyer was planning to argue,
about how Carl Smith's people were feeding stories to multiple outlets, trying to create a narrative that June was reckless, immoral, unfit. She told him that June hadn't wanted to ask, that she was humiliated this was even necessary, but without someone confirming the timeline, the rumor would stand, and the court might believe it. Johnny Cash listened, didn't interrupt. When Anita finished, there was silence on the line. She waited. "Johnny?" More silence. Then finally he spoke. His voice was quiet, flat. "I need to think about it." Anita didn't understand. "Think about what? You were in Arkansas. This isn't complicated." "I know where I was." "Then just call Ed Wilson. Tell him, that's all." Another pause, longer this time. "What if it makes things worse? Worse than June losing her daughters?" Johnny didn't answer that, just said he'd call her back. He hung up.
Johnny Cash didn't call back that day, or the next day. June Carter didn't call him either. According to those close to her at the time, she was devastated. Not angry, devastated, because she understood what his silence meant. He was protecting himself. Here's what Johnny Cash was thinking about, based on what he told people later. If he made that call to Ed Wilson, it would become a story, not just a correction, a story. Johnny Cash denies motel rumor. Johnny Cash defends June Carter. The very act of denying it would make it bigger. More columnists would pick it up. More people would hear the rumor who hadn't heard it before. And once his name was attached to June's custody case, every detail of his life would become relevant. The arrests, the pills, the times he'd shown up to concerts barely able to stand, the hotel rooms he'd destroyed, the checks that bounced, all of it would come out. Not because he'd done anything wrong in this specific instance, but because Carl Smith's people would make sure it came out. They'd use Johnny's past to argue that even if nothing had happened in Memphis, June was still surrounding herself and her daughters with dangerous, unstable people. Johnny Cash was thinking about self-preservation, about not becoming collateral damage in someone else's fight. And the longer he thought about it, the harder it became to make the call. This kind of story, about the moments when doing the right thing required more courage than grand gestures, matters. If you believe that silence can be a choice and choices reveal character, consider subscribing. This channel is built for people who care about that. 3 days passed. The custody hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. June's lawyer was frantic. Without someone willing to confirm Johnny's whereabouts, they had nothing but June's word. And in 1963, in a Southern courtroom, a woman's word against a rumor backed by influential men wasn't enough. Mother Maybelle Carter, June's mother and the matriarch of the Carter family, finally called Johnny Cash herself. She didn't ask, she stated facts. "Those girls are going to lose their mother because you won't make a phone call." Johnny tried to explain about how it would become a bigger story, about how Carl Smith's people would use it against him, against June. Maybelle cut him off. "You think I don't know that? You think June doesn't know that? She's known it from the start, and she stood by you anyway." Johnny was silent. "Every time you got arrested, who talked to the sheriff? Every time you missed a show, who covered for you with the promoters? Every time you showed up too high to remember your own lyrics, who kept the audience from walking out?" Still silent. "She protected you. When it cost her, when it was hard, when people told her to walk away, she stayed." Maybelle's voice was steady, not angry, just factual. "Now she needs you to protect her, and you're thinking about yourself." She hung up before Johnny could respond. Johnny Cash sat in his hotel room for hours after that call. Didn't sleep, didn't take pills, just sat there. According to people who saw him the next day, he looked like he'd aged a decade overnight. He made the call to Ed Wilson at 6 a.m. on Thursday morning, 4 days before the custody hearing. The conversation was brief. Johnny confirmed he'd been in Arkansas on the night in question. Wilson asked if he wanted to make a statement about his relationship with June Carter. Johnny said no, just the facts. He was in Arkansas, the rumor was false. Wilson asked if Johnny was willing to go on the record. Long pause. Then, yes. The article ran that afternoon. Johnny Cash refutes Memphis rumor, confirms Arkansas visit. By evening, 3 other outlets had picked it up. By Friday morning, it was in papers across Tennessee and Arkansas. And just as Johnny had feared, the follow-up stories started immediately. Johnny Cash's troubled history surfaces amid Carter custody battle. Questions raised about June Carter's association with troubled performer. Carl Smith's legal team cites Cash's criminal record in custody dispute. Everything Johnny had been afraid of happened. His arrests, his addiction, his instability, all of it became public conversation again, fodder for columnists and gossip and Carl Smith's legal team. If this moment, this realization that doing the right thing doesn't always protect you from consequences, means something to you, hit the like button. It helps more people find these stories. That's all. Just, if it mattered, let it show. The custody hearing happened on Monday, as scheduled. June's lawyer submitted the newspaper articles as evidence, called Johnny Cash as a witness. Johnny testified for 40 minutes, confirmed his whereabouts, answered questions about his relationship with June. Professional, respectful, no impropriety. Rip Nix's lawyer spent 2 hours cross-examining him, asked about every arrest, every missed show, every public incident. Tried to paint him as exactly the kind of person children shouldn't be exposed to. Johnny answered every question, calmly, truthfully, even the ones that made him look terrible. The judge ultimately ruled in June's favor, found no evidence of moral unfitness, maintained the existing custody arrangement. But the damage lingered. Johnny Cash's reputation, already fragile, took another hit. Radio stations in some markets stopped playing his records. Some venues canceled bookings. The narrative became troubled performer dragging down everyone around him. June's reputation suffered too, not because the rumor was true, but because the fight itself had been so public, so ugly. Johnny Cash and June Carter didn't speak for 2 weeks after the hearing, not because of anger, because of shame. June felt ashamed that she'd needed to ask, that her personal crisis had become his public humiliation. Johnny felt ashamed that he'd hesitated, that he'd even considered staying silent. When they finally did speak, it was brief. June thanked him. Johnny said he was sorry it took him so long. She said she understood. He said she shouldn't have to understand. They went back to work, toured together, performed together, pretended the silence hadn't happened. But it had, and they both knew it.